Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're back with a very interesting one. We're here with a ADC Ultimate Guide. So now what is this all about? Now basically, I'm just going to be making a guide for the ADC role in general. So now, what are we going to be talking about? Now you guys can see already from the chapters that I've placed on the video is we'll be talking about things like how to play laning phase, wave control, micro, macro, items, and champs. And of course, each of these we're going to be breaking down, pretty much in high detail. And hopefully what I aim for is for both players who are new to the role or players who are playing the role but, at maybe a lower rank, or even veterans of the role, hopefully to learn something. So whoever's watching this video, hopefully you will learn at least something. So now, who am I and why am I making this video? Well, obviously you guys can see that I basically have a YouTube channel basically almost solely dedicated to the ADC role. I am an ADC main and I have been playing this game ever since its release. Technically speaking, strictly speaking, I started playing like 3 days after it launched the public beta, and that was in season 0. So now we are in, I think, season like 7. So I've been playing for like, I think it's almost 2 years now. I'm not quite sure exactly of the timeline, but I think it's like 2 years, about 2 years now. So maybe it's even over 2 years now. I'm not too sure, but it's been a long time. It's been a long time. So of course, obviously being an ADC guy, what are my ADC credentials? Well, as you guys can see over here from the I've started by mastery down. I play every single ADC in the game, and I have at least mastery 5 on every ADC. Now I don't personally count Akshan as an ADC. I count him as like a mid lane marksman who technically is an ADC, but you don't play him in the ADC role. So except for Akshan, the rest of the ADCs, including Senna, I actually have mastery 5 at the minimum. So Senna mastery 5. We have the same for Tristana, Draven, Varus, Jinx, Corki, Ashe, Samira, Caitlyn, Jhin, Vayne, MF, Ezreal, and on Lucian, Xayah, and Kai'Sa I have mastery 6, and on Kai'Sa I nearly have mastery 7. So anyways, basically the point here is that I play ADC the role and I play all the ADC champs, so I definitely know the role. Well, I wouldn't say so much as inside and out, but I know the role really well, and I do think that I have some stuff that I can of course teach you guys. So now, of course, with the chapters, you do want to skip to the relevant parts if you're not interested in the literal entire video. So if you want to work on something in particular, maybe it's the macro, maybe it's the micro, you guys do want to skip to there. So a side note that is actually not really a side note, a really important point that I want to make right at the very beginning is, I'm recording this video in patch 3.5A. I'm probably going to release it in patch 3.5B, but I'm recording it in patch 3.5A. So a very pertinent question that many of you guys might be thinking of is, will this guide be relevant when I'm watching in the future? Now the answer to that is most likely. Now of course I can't say for sure because we don't know what is going to really change. Now it could be a fact that they rework one entire ADC and that section of the video might be completely irrelevant, but more or less I do expect that things don't change so fast. So most likely everything here is still going to be relevant except maybe the macro, because the macro especially, they do change, like the Rift Herald and the Dragon spawns multiple times, so in the future that might be different. So overall, majority by and large the guide should still be relevant. Maybe only small portions, like maybe a certain item got changed, a certain item got removed, a certain item got added, which we'll cover of course in the items section of the video. Maybe something like that could happen, but more or less the guide should be relevant whatever time you watch it. So basically for this guide, on relevant parts we're gonna jump into like the practice tool. We're gonna put up the visuals, but in the meantime, for the rest of the guide, we're just going to put up random like gameplays, and all these gameplays come from all of my previous like supplementary guides, complete guides, or whatnot. These are all my old, like not old, but like these are gameplays you guys have seen before. So if you're someone who watches the channel religiously, you guys would have seen these gameplays before. If not, it's just going to be in the background. You want to focus on what I am actually talking about, not what's in the gameplay. It's not necessarily connected to what I'm talking about unless I specifically say so, but it's just there for entertainment purposes. I did consider doing something like a PowerPoint for this, but that would be way too boring. So instead I'm just going to put some random gameplay in the background and I'm going to talk over that random gameplay, and that is what we will do. and just focus on what I'm saying basically, or focus on the visuals. So alright, let's jump straight into our first section. Okay, so the first section we're going to be talking about is the laning phase. Now, I find that this section, I put it at the very beginning because every match you're going to be facing a laning phase. Now, there is no match where you don't have laning phase. You have laning phase in every single match, and some games you don't get to late game, some games you end at the mid game or like the early game even if you're winning that hard, but every game has a laning phase. So this is probably one of the most important parts of the guide because you're going to face laning phase every single game. So what is laning phase all about? Well, it's really very simple. It's a 2v2 in the bot lane between ADC support and ADC and support. So the first thing we're going to cover about laning phase is a laning phase concept that is pretty important, but I don't think every single person knows it. So I am pretty sure at least a number of you are going to be learning from what I'm going to be discussing here. Is the concept of the poke, sustain, kill triangle. I'm gonna be putting up that visual right now. You guys can see on the screen. That is the poke, sustain, kill triangle. So here, in case you guys don't know what it is, it's basically like a scissors, paper, stone kind of, or rock, paper, scissors, however you want to call it, kind of scenario where a poke lane beats a kill lane beats a sustain lane, and a sustain lane beats a poke lane. Now, why is this the case? So first up, okay, before we get into why is this the case, first up, let's go into what these are exactly. Now, poke lane is pretty obvious. You basically just want to poke people down. So over here you can see examples of that is like Karma, Ezreal. Karma wants to poke with Q, Ezreal wants to poke with Q. They don't want to get into a all-in fight. All they want to do is poke. So what is a kill lane? A kill lane is the exact opposite of that. You don't really want to poke, you want to go all in. So as you guys can see here, Nautilus Draven is a very common kill lane. You just want Nautilus to hook in, Draven goes all in, smashes people and kills. Basically, it's pretty self-explanatory. And lastly, we have the sustain lane. So what is the sustain lane? Well, basically, sustain lanes are normally determined by supports because they aren't exactly really sustain ADCs. But basically, sustain lanes normally consist of a enchanter support that heals or shields, normally something like a Soraka, a Sona. Of course, a lot of other options as well, like Seraphine, for example, but normally the most common is like Soraka, a sustain lane, very classic sustain lane. Basically, all you do is you just stay in the lane and keep on healing through the poke or through the damage. Basically, through the damage, you just keep healing and trying to stay in lane and farm up. Is basically what a sustain lane wants to do. So now, why do these lanes counter each other? Let's go over and discuss one by one. We start off with poke to kill. So why does a poke lane beat a kill lane? Basically, it's pretty simple, because if you're getting poked down, imagine the Karma Ezreal poking down a Nautilus Draven. So what is going to happen is the Nautilus Draven is going to get chunked out. And as a result, they cannot go all in, because if they hook and go all in on Karma Ezreal wins the fight. Because imagine a half health Draven and a half health Nautilus going into a full health Karma and a full health Ezreal. They cannot kill them because they don't have enough health to do so. So that's why poke lanes beat kill lanes. Now, why do kill lanes beat sustain lanes? Well, it's pretty simple, this one, because basically kill lanes do a huge amount of damage in a short amount of time, whereas sustain lanes heal a large amount of damage over a long period of time. So imagine you're a Soraka. You have any random ADC. It could be anybody. Let's say you have a Soraka and you have a Jinx, for example. So Soraka Jinx lane versus a Draven Nautilus lane. Imagine Nautilus engages in onto the Jinx. What can Soraka do? Soraka can heal Jinx once, and after she heals Jinx, what's going to happen? She's going to have her heal on a cooldown, her heal being the W, like maybe on a 4-second or so cooldown. She has to wait 4 seconds to heal Jinx again, assuming she doesn't have ultimate yet. So by the time those 4 seconds are over, Jinx could be dead already to the Draven Nautilus, and you wouldn't be able to heal her again. So basically, you don't have enough burst heal. So someone who used to have burst heal is someone like a Yuumi, who had a lot of heal in a short amount of time. But Yuumi's heal even has been, nerfed to become a DPS kind of heal. So basically, that is why kill lanes beat sustain lanes. So why do sustain lanes beat poke lanes? Well, I think by now you're probably grasping the concept of why that is the case. Basically, because poke lanes chip away at your health a little bit by a little bit, but it doesn't matter to sustain lanes, because all they do is they restore whatever health was poked away. It's pretty much as simple as that. Imagine you get poked by Ezreal, Jinx gets poked by Ezreal, bam bam bam, Jinx health goes down, Soraka heals, Jinx takes a Q from Ezreal, Soraka heals her back to normal. Ezreal Qs hits Jinx again, Soraka heals the Jinx again, and Jinx is back to normal again. So basically that is why this is how the triangle of the poke, kill, and sustain works. Now of course there is two factors that sort of muddy this kind of really basic, easy concept to understand. Now the first reason why is because obviously this is assuming people play optimally. If people don't play optimally, technically speaking, any lane can kill any lane. So now let's go back to poke versus kill. We have the simple example of Karma Ezreal versus Nautilus Draven. Imagine right as laning phase starts, right at level 1, Karma walks straight up, gets hooked by Nautilus, and gets chunked out by Draven. Now, do they win that lane anymore? No. In theory, should they have? Yes, because Karma should never have walked up. They both should have stayed under the tower when laning phase starts. When the minions crash, they should have started poking them, and they shouldn't be in the position to get hooked by Nautilus. But we have, player error. Karma walks all the way up, or Ezreal for that matter walks all the way up. It could be anyone. Gets hooked by Nautilus, gets chunked down by Draven, and burns his flash, for example. Now, do they win the lane anymore? Not really, because you're down a flash, you've been chunked out, and you might have to recall, or you might have to play really, really safe under tower, might have to wait for the fruit to spawn, etc. So you don't win that anymore, even though in theory you should have. Now, of course, that is the first factor of why, it doesn't really work out that way. The second factor is there aren't necessarily always very clear cut as to what is a poke lane and what's a kill lane. Now imagine you have an Ezreal and a Nautilus together. So is this a poke lane or is this a kill lane? Well, the answer is that it technically becomes both, because Nautilus doesn't have poke, but Ezreal can still poke down his enemy. So if you're playing like Ezreal and Nautilus, let's say you're against like a Draven and Leona. Draven and Leona obviously is a classic kill lane. Ezreal still has the poke to sort of counter that. You can, poke down the Draven and Leona and maybe win the laning phase through there. But you also have the kill aspect of it, which is the Nautilus. Nautilus obviously can't poke. He can only go all in. So imagine if you are against, like, let's say you're against a Sona and a Jinx, for example. Both very squishy targets. They want to sustain through. If Nautilus hooks in, there is a very decent chance that Ezreal, despite not really being a kill kind of champion, he's more of a poke kind of champion, could maybe like EQ in and kill the Sona and or the Jinx. So it sort of becomes muddy when you have like a mix, like a poke plus kill lane, like you have an Ezreal with a Nautilus, for example. It kind of becomes like complicated, and at the same time, if you have like, let's say, a Soraka with a Draven, things could get complicated. But basically, this is the basic concept of how you want to evaluate lane. So this should be something that you're doing already in the loading screen. You should look at your lane matchup, which is why in many of my guides I always discuss the lane matchup and what both lanes wants to do, how do you want to win the laning phase, that sort of deal. So basically you want to pretty much analyze who are my opponents. Like, let's say for example, I'm playing an Ezreal with a Nautilus again, and let's say I'm against a Draven and Leona. Now I know that basically how we win the laning phase is if we poke them down and not go all in. So all I want to do is, as an Ezreal, I just want to poke down Draven, I want to poke down Leona. I don't want to go into an all-in fight with them. So what do I do then? When I hit into the match, I chat, I go tell Nautilus, do not engage on them in laning phase unless they're really low or something like that, because we win by poking them down, basically. So that's how you win the laning phase. Imagine if Nautilus just goes in on them level 1, and obviously we don't win against them level 1 because Draven has insane damage, whereas Ezreal can only poke. So we are just going to lose the laning phase, basically. Now, of course, your support may not always listen to you, but you should still know conceptually what is the correct thing to do and why. Alright, so that's the concept of the poke, sustain, and kill, and basically that's how laning phase works. Of course, there are many like support and ADC combos. There's not limitless, but there are so many possible ADC and support combos. Even more when you take into account like having like a mage supports, ADCs, or like off meta supports. Like, there's so many possible combinations. Matchups in the duo lane, a lot harder to learn than, like, for example, matchups in the Baron lane, where they're a lot more clear cut. Like, for example, like Jax beats Camille kind of thing is really straightforward as to why that is the case, but not so much so in the ADC lane, which is why I chose to explain the poke, kill, and sustain triangles for you guys to better understand, who beats who and that sort of deal. So anyways, with that out of the way, we can now jump to talking about wave control. Okay, so now we are in the practice tool to discuss about wave control. So now the first thing that you guys want to know is that waves in the early game actually spawn a cannon every third wave. So we'll kind of see that as the waves spawn, but anyways, obviously we are in the practice tool, so we don't actually have waves on like the bot and top lane, so we're gonna have to explain this using mid lane. Alright, so obviously the waves are going to be of even strength, so if you do nothing to the waves, they should kill each other at the same time, and like that. So see, both minions there died at the same time, and basically if you do nothing to the wave, your opponent does nothing to the wave, literally the minions will all just die at the same time. So basically you only have a few things you can do to the wave, and why you want to do each of the things to the wave we'll talk about as we go through. But first up, what you can do is to what you want to do sometimes is just last hit the wave. So basically, if nothing goes wrong, you don't want to push or you don't want to freeze, all you want to do is, as you guys can see, you want to just last hit, and basically you just wait until minions go down to 1 HP and you last hit. This is what you generally do if you don't, if you're not trying to achieve anything in particular. If you're just trying to farm in laning phase, all you want to do is to last hit, basically. So next thing you might want to do is to shove the wave. Now why do you want to shove the wave? Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. First up, what is shoving the wave? Well, obviously it's just basically using all your spells and trying to crash the wave into the enemy tower as fast as possible. So basically like this, you guys can see I'm just auto attacking the wave non-stop and pretty much just using everything to make sure the wave crashes into enemy tower like this. So why you want to shove the wave? There's a few reasons why you want to do this. First reason is to get tower damage, of course, that's the first reason. Second reason is to set up a dive. So if you want to set up a dive, let's say the enemy is here, let's say there's one enemy here, there is you and your support here, let's say the other support back, enemy ADC is under the tower by himself. So you want to shove the wave so that your jungler can come and you can 3-man dive the ADC. Now why is shoving the wave important? Because obviously the tower is going to attack the minions, and you can walk up, and this the enemy, you can walk up all the way to attack him without the tower attacking you. That's why you want to shove the wave. Now third reason why you want to shove the wave is you want to back. So if you want to back, you want to basically try your best to get the enemy wave into, you're not enemy wave, you want to get your wave into the tower so that number one, enemies will lose minions if they are not around and if they back themselves, and number two, so that you can maximize the amount of time before the wave comes back towards your tower and crashes into your tower. So now you guys can see that here I've backed, and the wave, of course there's no enemy here, but the wave is now still at their tower, and then the wave is going to start pushing back out. Basically, of course, the wave will bounce and wave is going to start pushing out towards me. So if this was a real match, I wouldn't walk all the way up there because that's really pushed up. Enemy would likely have cleared that minion, so the wave would have been somewhere more around like where I'm standing instead of where it actually is at the moment. But yeah, so that's basically how to shove a wave. It's pretty much the most classic thing that you see doing wrong in low elo, that people just randomly shove waves. So now what is the drawback of shoving waves? So it's pretty obvious, but well, I shouldn't say pretty obvious because, you know, this guide is also for beginners, so not everybody's going to know this, but let's take a look here. So, for example, if I'm shoving this wave mindlessly, for example, if I'm shoving this wave mindlessly, what is going to happen is my minions are going to be all the way up here. When the next wave comes, I'm going to have to farm the minions like somewhere around here. So, this obviously leaves me very open for a gank, because where is my tower? It's all the way over there. Let's say if I get ganked right now from over here, how am I going to get back over there? I'm going to have to try to run all the way back here, which is not good at all. So it kind of depends on what purpose you want to shove the wave on. Now there is also a fourth purpose of shoving the wave, is if you want to harass the enemy under tower. So not many champions want to do this. It's basically like Caitlyn, Draven, and like I don't know who else, but like for example Caitlyn, you can shove them under the tower and then you can set traps underneath and basically just poke them with your Q and auto attacks under tower. Something like this. So you can put traps under. Let's say this is an enemy, I'm gonna attack enemy here, I walk out of tower range, I attack enemy, I walk out of tower range, that sort of thing. So another like reason why you might want to do that to a wave is to harass enemy under tower, but that is not very common. So aside from shoving the wave, you can also freeze the wave. Now freezing the wave is a little bit of a harder concept, and it's sort of the opposite shoving the wave. So the wave here, I believe, has reset to the center. Now the issue here is that I don't actually have an enemy, so I can't actually show you how to freeze the wave, because this wave is not gonna freeze by itself. You need an enemy to attack and sort of start coming towards your side. So I'm gonna pretend that imagine I'm playing red side. So here you can see the wave is slowly starting to push into the red side. So red side can actually freeze the wave here. What they want to do is they want to keep some minions alive and wait for the next wave to come. So when the next wave comes, as you guys can see, the wave normally crashes right in the middle here. So it is still somewhat close to the middle, but it's slowly getting towards this side of the map. So here I'm gonna just push in a little bit. So if I was the enemy, like the red side person, like, you know, playing towards this side, here I want to keep the wave here. Like, look at where the wave is right now. It's at this wall. Where is this wall? Right outside my tower. So basically, if you want to freeze the wave, so in my perspective, I want to keep the wave somewhere around this line. So somewhere over here. Let me just indicate that using my traps. Leveling up the wrong person. Again, leveling up the wrong person. Okay, so here I'm gonna level up my trap. So I want to keep the wave somewhere around here, like where this trap line is. So why do I want to keep it here? Because my tower, range is somewhere around like here, like where the wards are. So basically it's right outside my tower range. So this basically allows me to, if anything happens, I can just go back into my tower range and stay safe. But at the same time, I can farm. So basically from the enemy's perspective, you guys can see their tower range is somewhere around here. So this is the ideal spot they want to keep the wave, which is around where the wave is at the moment actually. So they want to keep it somewhere around this line. Now of course, I'm just using this to explain the concept using mid lane. But if you're playing in the bot lane, which is where you will be playing normally, bot or top obviously, the concept is pretty much the same. So you see over here for the enemy, the tower range is over here. So they want to keep the wave somewhere around like this line, basically. Around this line, like where this wall is. And same goes for you. Your tower range is going to be until somewhere around here. So you also want to keep your minions somewhere around here. So what is the main reason that you want to freeze the wave? Now, the reason for this is really simple. It's to farm safely. So basically, with the wave frozen, you're really close to your tower. At the same time, you can still last hit minions. So with this, you can actually farm safely, and you are, you know, at a lot lower risk of like getting ganked or like just straight up dying to the enemy. So you're really close to the tower. If anything goes wrong, all you gotta do is you just gotta get under the tower, and you're mostly going to be safe. But what is the disadvantage of freezing a wave? The main disadvantage of freezing a wave is the fact that enemy will always have priority over you. So let's say I have frozen a wave over here. Let's say a fight breaks out over here at the dragon pit. The enemy team has already shoved in their wave to about here. So they can very easily rotate over to the fight, whereas you don't have priority and you have to clear their waves. Clear the wave that's pushing into you first before you can rotate. Now, of course, you could rotate directly, but that means that the wave is going to end up pushing into your tower, and you're going to end up losing minions, which is not what you really want to do. So sometimes freezing the wave is not necessarily very good. Now, the bad thing about freezing a wave could also be that it makes it easy for the enemy to shove. Now, for example, let's say if I have the wave over here, let's say an enemy wants to gank me, he's down over there in that brush, the enemy just have to shove a couple of minions here. I'm now stuck under tower, I'm farming under tower, and I can get dived by the enemy jungle or whoever else that, you know, wants to dive me. So that could be another problem. Now, the last thing you can do with your wave is actually to slow push your wave. Now, slow pushing is a little bit of a harder concept to understand, and it mostly is more relevant in the late game compared to the early game. Early game slow pushing is not really a thing. Late game is really only where slow pushing occurs. Now, take a look at what this is. So here, take a look at how many minions I have. I have 3 minions, enemy has 4 minions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clear a couple of minions. So here, you guys can see I left 1 enemy minion alive. So now I have a 1 minion advantage, which is barely an advantage here. So now you see there's a cannon, but my cannon has half a health more than his cannon. Now imagine if this tower was not here, and let's say only inhibitor was left. What is going to happen is, as you guys can see here, now what my wave look like. I have 1 cannon and 4 minions. He has 4 minions. Now my cannon is gone, but my minions are higher health than his minions. So slowly, what's going to happen is this wave is going to build up. Now, let me see if I can maybe show you that concept. Let me see if I can get rid of this tower here before my minions actually crash. I don't think I can do that. Actually, the tower is focusing me, so maybe I can do that. So here, I'm only going to attack the tower. Here you guys can see that my wave is building up again. Now, of course, my wave takes a bit longer to reach because of the fact that it takes time to come. So here, I'm going to keep on attacking the tower while we take a look at what's happening to the wave. So here, you guys can see now, I have 4 minions with the cannon now, and slowly it's taking out the enemy minions. Here you can see the wave is starting to build up already, and this is eventually going to, of course, build up to a point where it's so big and so huge that it can literally take down a tower by itself, which is why you see a lot of games. Sometimes you literally lose to minions, but it's because you haven't dealt with a slow push. So here you can see that when my next wave comes, I have 1 full wave plus 1 caster plus 1 cannon, whereas they are running out of minions. They only have this 1 guy left. So here you look, this wave is crashing into tier 2 tower, and it is this big at the moment. Here I'm taking out the tower myself, and after this tower I'm basically going to stop attacking, and we're going to see what happens. So here we've taken out the tower, and here our minion wave is basically, now we have 2 full waves. So here we have 1 full wave, there we have 1 full wave, and here by the time we reach here, our wave is going to be huge. So here the next enemy wave is coming right outside the tower. When we clear this wave, our huge wave is going to crash into the tower, and it can do some damage to the tower by itself. So let's see what happens here. Now unfortunately it walks into tower range before that really happens. So, but we still have 1 full wave here that's going to crash into the tower. So here my minions are going to start taking the tower. You guys can see my next wave is coming in. It's also going to start attacking the tower. The cannons are doing damage to the tower. Now look at how much damage this wave is doing to the tower by itself. I'm obviously not helping it. Next enemy wave is actually come in to sort of defend already. But look at how much damage this is doing to the tower. Tower is at 350 HP, or rather 3,500 HP at the start. And my huge crash wave has basically managed to shave off like about 1,500 of that health, which is really significant considering I did absolutely nothing. So it's really good to do a slow push basically in the game, in the later stages of the game on a side wave, especially because don't forget, in mid wave the lane is a lot shorter, so there's a lot less time for it to really build up. But if you do this on a side lane, the wave can build up to huge, like it can build up to like 3 waves full of minions, and that will literally destroy the enemy's tower in seconds sometimes. So yeah, that is it for our wave control section of the guide. Now we can move on to the next part. Alright, so now we can move on to the next section, which is going to be talking about micro. Now honestly, there isn't a whole lot I can really talk about micro. Honestly, it's because obviously there are like, I don't know how many ADC champs there are, like 15 ADCs in the game, and basically micro really just comes down to your champion mastery, and also the only other thing I can talk about is the use of summoner spells, which we'll go into a little bit later. So for champion mastery, basically, I've made some videos on learning champs, like you guys can refer to those if you want to see about that. But basically, micro, it really just comes down to how well practiced you are on the champion, and aside from that, it's just knowledge of like flash combos and what you can really do. So first step, of course, is to just learn your champion, play a lot of games on it, and learn how all their abilities works, what their scalings are, which one you should max first. Those are like really basic stuff. And then later on, you get onto how you can optimize usage of your abilities. For example, Kai'Sa's ultimate killer instinct. There are many ways you can use this. You can use this to dive all the way to the back line, like when your support goes in. Let's say you have a Nautilus hooks in, you can use it to fly all the way to an enemy. If you're in a 1v1, you can literally just tap it and ult on the spot just to get that shield. Or let's say you're getting hit by a Yuumi ultimate, you can literally just use it like a few feet, like to the right or to the left to get out of the Yuumi ultimate. It can literally be as simple as that. There are so many ways you can use the same thing. Like Kai'Sa's ultimate has so many uses, and that's really where the champion mastery comes in. We really have to sort of learn how are the ways you can use each of your abilities, something like that. And the only other thing you can learn is ability combos or flash combos. So for example, let's say Ezreal. Ezreal's ult can be repositioned by flash. So for example, if the enemies are standing right at where their tower is, you initially aim at the tower, they see the ult coming and they flash early. Let's say they flash early towards the left. You can also flash towards the left before your ult releases to actually reposition your ult to launch it, from your new position. So things like that. You can learn like flash combos, you can learn the combos, but really there's not too much I can say here in this ultimate guide to really help you with micro. Really, all you gotta really do is just learn the micro yourself and learn for each of the champions what you can do. And for each specific champion in my original complete guide, I do go through what all these skills and abilities are, and I also try to go through combos or tips and tricks with those abilities. So if you're trying to learn a particular champion, you can refer to the complete guides playlist that I have on my channel. Alright, so next up we're going to talk about summoner spell usage, which is going to be a lot more standard across ADCs. Basically, ADCs always take flash, and they either take exhaust or they take barrier, so it's really a lot more straightforward to explain. Now, flash is a spell pretty much every champion in the game takes. It's a really straightforward spell. Basically, all it does is you blink forward or back or whichever direction you choose slightly. That is flash. I'm sure everybody knows that by now, but how do you optimize flash usage on ADCs? Well, generally, it kind of depends on what kind of game state you're in. If you are really fed, you literally just want to save your flash to do it defensively. Because if you're fed enough, let's say you're 10-0, there are games that you are really fed. It's not even worth it to flash forward to kill a like 0-5 enemy, because your life is worth more than his life. So you're using your flash to take his life, but your flash is better used to save your own life than to take someone else's. So if you're really far ahead, you want to use your flash defensively, whereas if you're really far behind, you should use your flash more offensively. Of course, if the situation arises and you need to flash away to prevent yourself from dying, you do that. But if the situation arises where there's a low HP enemy with a shutdown, you do want to just flash in and get that kill so you can get the shutdown and get that bounty. Even if you die for it, it's generally worth it if you're behind to flash in, get the kill, and die. So flashing, I think, is something that most people already know about. So these are some things that some people just may not really consider. But aside from that, just generally knowing which walls you can flash over and which walls you can't. You don't want to be in an embarrassing situation where you're trying to run away. You flash straight into the wall and you blow your flash and then you die because of it. So know which walls you can flash over, which walls are too thick, and yes, just in general, just things like that. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to flash. Now, when it comes to barrier is also really straightforward. Normally, what you want to do for barrier is when you're in like an all-in fight, you want to pop the barrier somewhere in the middle. The reason why you never want to use barrier at the start or the end is because if you use it at the start, the enemy can see you have barrier. They can try to disengage or not fully commit to the fight because they know that you popped barrier, so they can just get that cooldown from you without committing too much. You don't want to use it at the end because sometimes your health bar falls quickly, and if you just randomly get bursted like one shot for half of your health, you don't even have a chance to use your barrier, and basically it's wasted because you never really even popped it. So generally, the most optimal time to use barrier is in the middle of the fight, when the enemy has already committed to the fight, but you're not just getting instantly bursted to the point that you don't even have an opportunity to use barrier. And barrier is also really good to use if you're trying to bait. So sometimes if you're low HP, you can try to bait enemies to tower dive you or bait enemies into a fight, and then you pop your barrier, which actually is a pretty huge shield, all things considered, and can absorb like maybe 3 auto attacks from the enemies, and basically can literally win you the fight. So barrier still is a really good summoner spell for ADCs. Now, exhaust is pretty simple. Now, ever since they nerfed the range on exhaust pretty much has only one use, which is to exhaust whoever is in your range. Remember that as an ADC, you have to keep yourself safe and of course your teammates safe with your exhaust as well. But it's not worth it to put yourself in danger to exhaust someone. So for example, if there is a fed Caitlyn on the enemy team, you know you're never going to reach her to exhaust her. So you don't want to dive into the enemy team to get the exhaust on Caitlyn. You want to exhaust whoever else, is onto you. So for example, even if there's a 0-5 Riven on top of you and there's like a 5-0 Caitlyn all the way behind, you just want to exhaust the Riven because you're never going to get in range to exhaust Caitlyn unless like you're in a 1v1 against Caitlyn or something like that. If not, you're never really going to get an opportunity to get past the enemy team to exhaust the fed ADC in the backline, for example. So you really just want to exhaust whoever is a good exhaust target and is in your range. So of course you don't really want to exhaust a Nautilus who's engaging on you or your team because he doesn't really do that much damage. But if there is, like a assassin jumping onto you or your teammate nearby, like a Rengar or like let's say there's a Kha'Zix jumping in. Could also be like a backline diver, like a Fiora or a Yone just dashing into the backline. You do want to pop the exhaust onto them. So basically, the rule of thumb is just exhaust whoever you can, whoever is in your range, and whoever is not in your range, just leave them be. So now that we've talked a little bit about micro, now we can actually go into something that I can actually discuss and help you guys out on, which is your teamfight positioning. Of course, as an ADC, teamfight positioning is king. You always want to stay safe and do damage. So the general concept of teamfight positioning is you always want to be in a position where you are safe, where you're not in any kind of danger if at all possible, and you just want to stay safe and just attack whoever's in your range. If you can only reach the frontline tanks, just attack the frontline tanks. If you can only reach, you know, a fighter, maybe it's a Darius, just attack the Darius, you know, for example. You don't want to go all the way behind and attack the ADC or like the mage if you can help it, because doing that will get you killed basically. Now there are of course some exceptions to this, like some fights are won by diving backline. For example, if there's only one fed enemy Caitlyn and the whole team is just trying to protect her, let's say you are a Kai'Sa, you can win the fight for your team by diving in the back, killing Caitlyn, and then you die as well. And then your team wins the 4v4 because they don't have the Caitlyn anymore, who is their most fed member, and sometimes you can win fights like that. But as a general rule of thumb, of course there are caveats, which of course I did just cover. In general, you always just want to stay safe behind your frontline or behind your teammates, and just try to DPS whoever you can. Of course, on certain champions like Lucian, Kai'Sa, or like Vayne, short range champions, this is a lot more difficult. But you know, as far as possible, you always want to be behind. You never want to be the main focus of the enemy team. So here I have two gameplay examples, and both of them are using Caitlyn, because Caitlyn has the longest range in the game, is one of the easiest champions to explain positioning on, because you can position very far back because of your insane range. So let's just hop into the first example. I'll show you guys the example at full speed, then we'll slowly break down exactly what is happening. Okay, so now we'll explain what's happening slowly here. So here we're attacking the dragon, of course. Now we're gonna attack the only person in our range, which is Gwen. Thresh is now our frontline, and Riven as well. So here we're staying at max range, as you guys can see, attacking wherever we can. We get a hit on Ashe because Gwen is in the shroud, and then the kill is finished onto the Galio. Now we are chasing the Ashe and the Gwen down. We still have Riven in front of us, and we're just trying to get into range. We're standing behind anybody we can. Now I'm trying to actually ult, but Gwen does manage to block the ultimate. But here again, Thresh is tanking the tower, so I'm attacking Gwen. I actually accidentally attacked the tower there, which is a little bit of a micro mistake. But here we're talking mainly about positioning. So yeah. Now here we have our next example, and I'll be right back when the example is over. So sort of the same deal here. Here I'm staying behind the Morgana. I use my E to reposition. I use the blast cone to get over the wall to put myself again behind the Morgana, so I'm never in the front line. Here I realize coming in, I'm just attacking her at maximum range, making sure I'm not in range to get dashed on. Here I don't really have a front line, but here I'm just walking up and attacking whoever is in range. Now here that the fight is over, I'm actually flashing aggressively to kill the Gwen, because in this case Gwen is the jungler and I do need to get rid of her so my team can get Baron, and also there isn't any more kill threat on me with only Gwen and Ashe left, so I did flash forward to kill the Gwen there. So that's a good example of the use of an aggressive flash in a team fight. Okay, so now we're gonna be moving on to talking about macro. Now, This might come as a really big shock to some of you, but honestly ADC is one of the easiest positions to play macro from, because the fact that you are an ADC, a squishy damage carry, means that there's not a lot of macro plays that you can actually do personally. Now if you have good macro, you can tell your teammates to do these plays. However, whether your teammates listen to you or not is a completely different story, and we're not going to really cover what is the correct macro play in a certain situation. We're just going to cover how you play macro as an ADC, which really, as I said, is really easy because there's not a lot you can do. Now think about it. If you're a support, you need to roam up to, like say Herald fights, you need to roam up to mid or roam in general. If you're playing mid, you should be roaming to top or bot to, get kills. Jungle is obviously a roam position in general. You're supposed to go all around the map and roam around, so your macro is really difficult, hardest macro in the game. And if you're on top, you normally have chances to split push if you're playing that kind of style, so you do need good macro to do that. But if you're an ADC, you literally you can't split push because you're too squishy and you can get caught out and you will die. You generally don't roam because you're normally focused on farming and getting items. So you're literally the easiest macro role in the whole game. So macro on ADC is less important compared to macro on literally every single other role. That doesn't mean it's not important, of course, because in the late game, if your macro is good, you can direct your team to, for example, sneak a Baron, or for example, allocate who goes what lane, that kind of thing. But of course, that requires your teammates to listen to you, so that is a whole different problem altogether. So as an ADC, what do you really have to do for macro? Now, first thing I'm going to cover is Herald and Dragon. So as we all know, at 5 minutes both Herald and Dragon normally spawn. Now most of the time, most teams like to go for Dragon because triple Dragon is a very strong win condition. Many teams like to go for Dragon. So if both teams go for Dragon, the macro is really simple. You just rotate to the Dragon team fight. Try your best to push out the lane before that. Like at 4 minutes 50 or so, you should be hard shoving the lane, which we of course did cover just now about why you want to shove, because you want to rotate. So you should be like shoving out the lane at like 4 minutes 50 or so, and trying to get ready to rotate over to Dragon. Now of course this is situational depending on whether your jungler is actually ready to do the Dragon, whether your team is in position. But if everything goes well, that should be the kind of time you want to shove out the lane. So you want to shove out the lane, rotate over to the Dragon, have the Dragon team fight, hopefully get the Dragon. So what normally happens if both teams have contested Dragon is, regardless of which team picked up the Dragon, both teams will now go to Herald. So what do you do now as an ADC? Personally, I think the best thing to do as ADC is always stay in the Dragon lane. So why is this the best macro play for you not rotating at all? Basically, if the enemy ADC rotates, you get free farm from the waves, and you get free tower plate. So you get a big goal advantage without even killing anybody, and you get gold for free. If the enemy ADC stays in lane, you now have a 1v1 against the enemy ADC. If you're the weaker ADC, all you have to do is stay under tower and farm safely. If you're the stronger ADC, you can try to get a solo kill 1v1 against the enemy ADC, and then you can again take minions and take plates. Now if you're 1v2 against the enemy ADC and support, this is great, because all you have to do is stay safe under tower and not die. Do not engage, do not fight, just farm minions and try not to engage down, try not to get dived. Of course, easier said than done in some situations, but try your best to not engage and to not die. And your team will be 4v3 at the Herald, so your team should win the Herald fight and they should get the Herald if this is the case. So basically, whenever after Dragon fight and when Herald comes, all you want to do is just not rotate, just stay in lane. Your support should rotate, but you as an ADC should not rotate. You should simply just stay in lane and just pick up farm. Now of course there is another scenario possible where your team and the enemy team trade objectives, like your team goes for Herald, enemy team goes for Dragon, or vice versa. Of course, in that case, if it's for Dragon, you do want to rotate to Dragon. If it's for Herald, you don't want to rotate for Herald. And the other scenario is there is a Dragon fight, but no one ends up taking the Dragon. So basically, in this scenario, it's really obvious. Don't think I have to explain it. Both teams are just going to go back to Dragon, and there's another fight that's going to happen. Either that, or we come into the second scenario where teams trade objectives. So basically, that is the early game macro. When it comes to the second Dragon and second Herald, this really depends on what time first Dragon and first Herald was taken as to what time they are spawning. So this one is really variable, and it's really hard to standardize what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But now what we're instead going to talk about is mid to late game ADC macro. Now, honestly, ADC macro is really simple, because as I mentioned, you are a squishy damage carry who can kill people easily but also get killed incredibly easily. So you should never really be alone in the mid to late game unless you're on the side lane catching waves, which is one of the 3 things you can do as an ADC. So as an ADC, there's only 3 things you can do in the mid to late game. Number 1, group with your team. So this is pretty obvious when you want to group with your team. If there's objectives to be taken, if you guys are trying to force down like a tower and you want to group together, that sort of thing. So basically, number 1 is group with your team. Safety in numbers, hopefully get picks, hopefully get objectives, etc. So group with your team, number 1. Number 2, catch side lane farm. So as we move on to the mid and late game, a lot of times people are busy getting objectives. People are busy just running down mid, because obviously mid lane is the most popular lane because it's in the center. But there's a lot of times going to be waves stacking up on the side lanes that need to be farmed. So as a general rule of thumb, you only want to go and catch side lanes if it is safe to do so. So for example, let's say your tier 1 tower is down. You only want to farm in an area which is safe, which is basically at your tier 1 tower, at your fallen tier 1 tower, or past that, like closer to your tier 2 tower. You don't want to go all the way to the enemy side of the map to their tier 1 tower to farm if you don't have vision of the enemy team. Of course, if you can see like 4 or 5 members of the enemy team on the opposite side of the map, it's of course safe to go up and push all the way up and farm. But assuming you don't have vision, you don't want to farm too far forward, and optimally, if you're catching sites, you do want to be alone so you can get all the solo gold and XP. And the third thing you can do, if you don't need to group, and if there are no side lane waves to catch, then you go to number 3, which is farm jungle. So you go to farm jungle, you basically farm non-buff camps, because now there is of course buff sharing. So generally you don't want to farm the buff, because if not, your jungler won't get a buff. So in general, you farm any camp that's not a buff. So literally raptors, Krugs, wolves, Scuttle, and Gromp all are up for grabs. Of course, if it is safe to do so. Of course, don't go to Scuttle if you don't know where the enemies are. Don't die over trying to farm a Scuttle. But yeah, so basically, if you can't catch sides and you can't farm jungle, then the only thing you can do, because those 2 are out, is group with your team. So if there's no jungle to farm, no side lanes to catch, then just group with your team. So basically, group when you have to. If you don't have to group, catch sites. If you can't catch sites, farm jungle. If you can't farm jungle, group with your team. It's a really simple concept to understand, because as an ADC, there's not a lot that you can do alone because of the nature of your role and how squishy you are. So that's basically it for like ADC macro. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the ADC items. Now basically I'm only going to go through like the physical basically, I'm just going to go through like the whole physical items section here. And I'm going to try to do it in like a relatively quick manner, because there's a lot of items and it's just going to be pretty general, just to get a general idea. So first up, we have Bloodthirster. So Bloodthirster is generally a last crit item for majority of ADCs. If you're going for the sustain, it's gonna generally be your 4th crit item. You don't really go for it earlier, except on champions like Samira and Draven, where you go for it as a first item. Gives you AD crit, as well as mainly the lifesteal is what you built this for. Next up, we have GA, gives you AD armor, and mainly you get this for the revive, where you will revive with half health and 30% mana when you die. Normally built as a last item on majority of ADCs, at least in the current patch. Next up, we have Static Shift, possibly the least popular ADC item of them all. Gives you attack speed, crit rate, as well as a little bit of movement speed. It is one of the 3 energized items, which does give you an AoE, like a lightning attack on hit. However, this is not very good in the majority of ADC builds, at least at the moment, simply because Rapid Fire Cannon is better because it gives you longer range. And if not, you won't have space, and you won't have space to build both Rapid Fire Cannon and Static Shift. So generally, absolutely no ADC builds this at the moment, unless you do have a preference for this over Rapid Fire Cannon. So Blade of the Rune King is not a very popular ADC item, mostly actually built by bruisers in the top lane, but the one ADC that does build it is Vayne. This gives you a little bit of AD, quite a bit of attack speed, gives you physical vamp, and also gives you two passives. The first one is, of course, for you to deal on-hit damage based on enemies' health, so really good for against tanks. And secondly, you do get a passive that allows you to drain enemies' movement speed for a couple of seconds, and this helps you like either run away or chase down people. So next up we have the rapid fire cannon, again another energized item, same stats as static shift, crit, attack speed, move speed, and of course you do get energized attack. So when you have the energized attack stacked up, what you get is you get a bonus range for a little bit, and after that one bonus ranged attack you go back to normal range. This is generally built as a third crit item on a lot of crit ADCs, because this gives you the bonus range, and when you have enough damage, that one attack can deal decent damage to many a champion. So Runan's Hurricane gives you 25 crit as usual and 45 attack speed. Now this is the most attack speed you can get from one item, same as Wit's End, which we'll cover later. This gives you a passive which allows you to, instead of attacking just one person, allows you to attack not only one main target but two secondary targets as well. And the secondary targets will take 55% damage and also can trigger on-hit effects. So this is really good generally on champions with a lot of AoE, like Jinx or Kai'Sa, for example, to spread her passive. But aside from those champions, not too many champions generally go for Runan's Hurricane. So next we have lethality items. So first up we have Youmuu's Ghostblade, which is, of course, gives you AD, ability haste, and 15% lethality. So when you get up to maximum momentum stacks, you also gain a bonus movement speed. So this is only built on basically lethality ADCs like Varus, for example, or sometimes Jhin. So Duskblade is another lethality item, 55 AD, 10 ability haste, and again 15 armor pen, which is also known as lethality. And when you're unseen, your next attack deals bonus damage and does a huge slow, but only for a quarter of a second. So again, only built on lethality ADCs. Next up we have Steric's Gauge, is not the ADC item, so we're not going to talk about it. IE is a staple ADC item, generally as a second or third item on basically every single crit ADC. If you're going for a crit build, IE has to be in your build. It's one of the essential items. Gives you 55 AD, crit, as well as increased crit damage. So next up, Mole Reminder, the first of a couple of three actually armor penetration items, gives you armor pen as well as grievous wounds in addition to 45 AD. Now, no ADC builds Black Cleaver except possibly Samira, but what it really does, it gives you a little bit of health, AD, ability haste, and also gives you a shred on your attacks that shreds for 4% per attack up to 24%, and also gives you bonus movement speed from the Rage. So Manamune, only Ezreal actually builds this, so I'm not really going to explain this. Triforce, what we have here is, again, mostly built by Ezreal, but other champions like Vayne, for example, can build this as well. Gives you pretty much almost every single important stat for an ADC, and also mainly gives you the Spellblade passive, which of course when you cast ability enhances your next attack. Also has the Rage passive. Maw is one of your two magic resist options, so this gives you AD magic resist and ability haste, and gives you a lifeline passive which actually causes a magic damage shield to trigger when you go below 35% health. So when you trigger that shield, you do get extra 30 AD and 10% Omnivamp. So I'm actually going to jump over to talking about Wit's End, which is your other magic resist option. Gives you 45 attack speed, again tied with Runan's for having the most attack speed in one item. Gives you 50 magic resist, and also gives you on-hit magic damage on your attacks. And while you're below half health, you will actually gain additional healing. So two uses for this. Number one is when you're against a heavy AP team and you need attack speed. And this is when you're against a heavy AP team but you don't need attack speed. Number two use of Wit's End is on certain champions like, for example, Vayne or Kai'Sa. You simply build it for the on-hit healing, because the on-hit healing is pretty strong as well. Dev's Dance, generally not an ADC item unless like your GA is down and you need a physical defense item. Dev's Dance can work. Gives you AD, armor, ability haste, and gives you a cauterize passive which delays the physical damage that you deal across 3 seconds. And also has a dance passive where you actually gain 10% max health on takedown, which is actually really useful. Next up we have Phantom Dancer, again same thing, crit, attack speed, movement speed, and gives you a lifeline passive. that when you are at 35% health, it gives you a shield that absorbs damage for 5 seconds. Now, this shield does not overlap with Mahma Mordius or Steric's Gauge, which ADCs don't build, but lifelines do not actually overlap, so you can only build one lifeline item. Essence Reaver, 45 AD, 25% crit, 20 ability haste, and this gives you your abilities bonus damage scaling off of your crit, and also restores a little bit of mana on hit. Now this is generally an item that no ADC builds because it is very overpriced for what it does and not very cost efficient, but in theory, if the price was affordable, it would be it would be an item that champions like Lucian or MF would like to build, caster champions that rely on their abilities to deal damage. So next up we have Storm Razor, pretty much the staple first item option for majority of ADCs. This is of course because you get a decent amount of AD, you get crit, you get attack speed, and you also get a slow as well as additional damage on your energized passive, and it also builds out a BF Sword, which is a really good build path. So, Swordless Grudge is your second armor penetration option. Of course, it gives you armor pen, AD ability haste, and gives you the icy passive, which of course slows champions that you hit with your attacks and abilities. Slurry Charge Blade is generally a third crit item or fourth crit item option. Gives you crit, ability, haste, as well as quite a decent chunk of attack speed. And the passive allows you to get a stack every time you cast an ability, and this stack is consumed on your auto attack, where it will deal bonus on hit magic damage that can critically strike. So really useful to mix up your damage, and a really good item for champions that cast abilities a lot and auto attack in between. So think of Lucian, for example. So here we have Navori Quick Blades, 45 AD, 25% crit, 15 ability haste, and when you crit, you reduce all your ability cooldowns by 20% of their remaining cooldown. So it has diminishing returns, because the shorter cooldown you have remaining, of course, the less your less CD you're gonna get back when you trigger Quick Blades. So this is generally an item that is built by champions who of course want to cast a lot of spells. Champions like Tristana and Xayah, for example. Edge of Night, another lethality option. This time it gives you 8 armor pen only and gives you a shield that blocks the first hostile ability that hits you. Gives you health and AD as well. So ADCs don't build Hullbreaker. Only Ezreal builds Divine Sundra, so I'm not going to explain that. Serpent's Fang is another lethality item. Gives you 12 lethality, 50 AD, and 10 ability haste. And also gives, basically, to simplify this huge explanation, is it reduces the shielding on enemies, whether they currently have a shield or they are going to have a shield in the future. It basically reduces the shielding that they get. So Lord Doms, what it does, 35 AD, 25% crit, and armor penetration. So this is your final armor penetration option, and you get another passive where if you're not in combat, your next attack gains 80% attack speed. Basically, it makes it easier to get out your basic attack. This is the normal staple armor pen item for most ADCs because it gives you crit, so you don't have to build one of the other ones that don't give crit. So since this gives crit, it actually allows you to scale a lot faster into the late game, which is mainly why you go for Lord Doms on a lot of ADCs. So that was pretty much all the ADC item options. Now I'm going to get into the final part of the video, which is actually discussing all of the ADCs and what they do. So this is basically going to be pretty much a summary of what each ADC is and their main role and who would enjoy to play them. Mainly targeted at either new players who don't really know what they want to main, or also could be like veteran players that want to just pick up a new champion, for example. So just for completeness of an ADC complete guide, I'm going to cover literally every single ADC and what it does. So I'm just going to go in the order that I have here. So obviously no particular order. Technically the particular order is my mastery order, but yeah, technically doesn't really matter. So first up we have Kai'Sa. So Kai'Sa is strong in the early and late game, mainly plays around her evolves, and so you build is the only ADC to have weird item builds because of how you want to get certain stats to get your evolutions. Can be played front to back as a hyper carry, or can be played as the only real true assassin style ADC, where you can ult a squishy target in the backline and burst them down with your Q W auto combo. So next up we have Xayah. Xayah is a pretty one of the longer range ADCs in the game, but her main selling point is her ultimate, which makes her untargetable for just over a second, and also having feathers on the ground, which if you pull back with your E, roots people. So she's very good into teams who want to jump on top of you, which there are a lot of. So a lot of enemy assassins and backline divers really struggle against Xayah, just because of how basically when they run into her, they're just going to get rooted and kited out. Lucian is a very short-range ADC. However, he is a caster-style ADC that mainly relies on his abilities to deal damage and having auto attacks in between those abilities. He does a lot of burst damage, therefore he is really good in short trades and short fights. He has a very strong early game. However, he doesn't scale as well into the mid and late game as other champions unless you are obscenely ahead. Ezreal alongside Xayah is the other very safe ADC option, and the main reason that is the case is because he has a blink on his E, his arcane shift, which basically acts as a second flash, so allows you to chase people down or run away. So you have a safety tool pretty much with you at all times, so you generally are a very safe champion. Aside from that, Ezreal focuses on poking. All of his abilities aside from his E are skill shots, so you're pretty much focused on landing skill shots to deal damage to enemy champions. Again, another caster style ADC much like Lucian. Miss Fortune is a teamfight style ADC where her main goal is to get a huge multi-man ultimate with her bullet time and to win a team fight through a wombo combo, hopefully with someone else on her team who can CC them inside her ultimate. She is also very strong in the early game laning phase because she does have the double up, which can actually bounce over minions and crit onto enemy champions, which is why she is a very oppressive laning phase, and she also has pretty decent range. Vayne has the lowest range alongside Lucian and other champions like Tristana. So Vayne is a really low range champion. However, she excels in shredding tanks. She has passive on her W that every 3 attacks she deals true damage, so she's really strong into tanky comps because she literally ignores all of their defenses. And her other selling point is the fact that she's a very strong hyper carry, and when she gets to like 2-3 items onwards, she can really do a lot of damage and survive at the same time. She also has self peel with her condemn, invisibility on her ultimate, and a lot of mobility with a very low cooldown Q, which basically is tumble that does a really small roll. So Jhin is a very high damage champion, really unique champion design where he cannot gain attack speed but instead gains attack damage. Really hard hitting champion, very strong in the laning phase, and really focused on kind of a playstyle of a sniper. He has a very long range W which roots people from downtown, and also a ult which fires over a screen away. So really the dream champion if you are the kind that loves to snipe people. Caitlyn has the longest base range out of any ADC in the game and has a very strong early game because of it, using her range to harass enemies, and also really strong hyper carry scaling into the late game when she gets to 3-4 items is really strong, but does suffer from a somewhat weak mid game. So Samira, one of the 3 ADCs that wants to jump into the enemy team, the other 2 being Tristana and Kai'Sa. Samira is a very combo based ADC that is mostly focused on using your abilities to charge up your passive, which gives you your S rank and allows you to deal AoE, and your ultimate allows you to deal AoE damage around the entire enemy team, hence why you want to be in the middle of the enemy team to deal damage to them. She has a very unique playstyle and is relatively difficult to play, but can be incredibly rewarding when mastered because she does get resets on her E and allows her to dash all over the place and just wreck an enemy team if you are good at her. Ashe is the lowest damage ADC in the game, and she is very supportive with slows on all of her abilities, a vision tool with her hawkshot, as well as a global stun using her ultimate. So generally only picked when you are when you have a high damage team and you're just trying to be more supportive of an ADC. Not really, pretty much the worst ADC in terms of actually carrying by yourself, but really a strong ADC if you are playing with friends or if you're in high elo and playing with a team that you can rely on. Corki, pretty much your only true ADC option for AP. So of course Corki does 80% magic damage and 20% physical damage, so you pretty much pick him if your team has no AP to balance out your team comp. Aside from that, he is generally focused on number 1 poking with his Q and his ult, as well as number 2, his package, which is a huge teamfight tool which does a huge amount of damage, allows you to zone enemies away or split up enemy teams and win teamfights in that way. Jinx, a very strong hyper carry with one of the few champions that has very strong AoE damage in the game, wins fights through getting one reset, which gives her a lot of attack speed and movement speed to get more and more kills and wipe out the enemy team in that way. However, she has one of the weakest early games alongside Vayne, and she also has absolutely no mobility, so it's really easy to catch her out and kill her. So she's no mobility and really squishy, but can deal a lot of damage if protected. Varus is an incredibly long range ADC with incredibly strong poke tool with his arrow, can be built attack speed, can be built AP, and can be built lethality, so it's a very versatile champion. And has a very strong teamfight ultimate with his Chain of Corruption, which allows him to root enemies as well as transfer that root to other enemies and just win a teamfight in that way. Draven, the strongest early game ADC in the game. Very hard to play micro-wise because you do have to catch your access, but in terms of carry potential and damage, he is one of the best ADCs if you are good at him. And yeah, but he is of course a challenge to play micro-wise, so take note of that if you are trying to pick up Draven. Tristana, the final ADC that loves to jump into the enemy team. She is really strong in the early game and in the late game. In the late game, she's really strong as a hyper carry. In the early game, really strong to just jump on top of someone, put a bomb on them and deal damage. That way, her main point of damage is her bomb. However, like Caitlyn, she suffers from a very weak mid game. And finally, we have Senna. So Senna is really different of an ADC. She isn't really even an ADC. She is not meant to farm at all. She gets soul stacks from minions that has a lot higher chance of dropping if you are not the person last hitting it. So generally you play Senna, if you're playing Senna as an ADC, you're playing it with a carry mage or with a tank who takes the farm instead, and you pick up the souls. Souls gives you a variety of benefits such as increased range and increased crit chance, for instance, but she is generally a supportive ADC that does damage at the same time. Her Q heals and her ultimate shields, but she can at the same time deal absolutely insane damage. So there we have it with all the ADCs and also every single facet of being an ADC. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this ultimate complete guide on ADCs, and hopefully you guys learned something from it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and goodbye.